Welcome, everybody, to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Thank you so much for listening in. What's Working is the radio show / podcast where we talk about the trends influencing the workplace, the workforce, the marketplace. I want to get guests on this show that can teach you and me something about how to get better at whatever it is that we do. And today's show is a instructive, but I guess perhaps primarily a cautionary tale. You and I need to have our head on a swivel when it comes to some things. And the crooks out there continue to get better at what it is that they do. And we've got to have our head on a swivel to keep these people at bay, because they have the power and the influence to really harm us. And what I'm specifically talking about right now is financial crimes. And it was several weeks ago that I was at a presentation here locally where the FBI agent came on and at the presentation, and the room was full of a bank's customers, and I was invited as kind of as a special guest to listen in. And he detailed some of the ways that the bad guys out there in the financial crimes world are able to get their hands on your and my money. And they're very clever at what they do. And they're very good at what they do. And too often, you and I aren't aware that something bad's happened until we check our balance and we say, wait a minute, that's not right. Or more likely, as I heard at this event, a vendor of ours will call and say, hey, I don't want to be rude, but it's been months and we haven't been paid. And you look online and you say, no, I show the check. I wrote it to you. It's here in my QuickBooks or whatever. And it says it's been paid. And they say, well, we haven't seen it. Can you pull up the canceled check? And you pull up the canceled check, and it turns out that the crook has somehow gotten their hand on that check, and through the crafty use of technology, changed it from the vendor's name to their own name or a business name. And the process of chasing that money begins at that point. It was at that conference that I thought, I think my listeners need to hear about this, because these are some things that I don't know anything about. I don't write a lot of checks. Many of you do many more than I do. But it gave me a little bit of a fear and a need to be cautious and wary, and I reached out to the speaker, and Dan Sigmond is going to be sitting across from me when we come back from break. His title is, as so often in many government roles, not a short, pithy title, but a long one. He's the Active Supervisor Special Agent, White Collar Crimes Federal Bureau of Investigation Agent for Mobile, Alabama, which is where this show is broadcast. So Dan's going to come in here and he's going to talk about these crimes and how we can figure them out. How not figure them out, that's the wrong term. How we can become aware of them. And to say that a lot of it is just common sense is not exactly true due to the craftiness of these crimes. So if you are a leader of a business unit, whatever it may be, and you authorize payments, you authorize checks, if you're somebody in your business that actually deals with payments, this is content that I think you need to pay close attention to. Because there are stories, as Dan will tell us, of people being able to get their money back. But is it a process that you want to have to go through? Do you want to spend months going through the process of trying to claw this money back, finding the crook, prosecuting whatever, or just avoid it altogether? So the show today is going to be on financial crimes, and Dan Sigmond is very qualified to talk about this. Again, I saw him at a presentation, and I don't think the time that we're going to have in the show is going to be able to dig deep enough into this. I can already predict having him back before too long to get further into this. But we'll get started. It's a good thing to do. Dan Sigmond, when we come back, FBI guy, White Collar Crimes, Financial Crimes Unit. If you listen to this now and you say, hey, there's somebody on my team that needs to hear about this, they're more vulnerable to me than this check thing. You can find this podcast. This radio show is a podcast at whatsworkingcam.com. We'll be right back after this message with Dan Sigmond.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We're back in the studio today. It's rare that I get a guest in the studio these days. As the show continues to grow, we're doing more and more of these interviews over Zoom. But we're in the studio here in the very thorough and complex recording division of Marston Communications, and you'd be laughing if you knew what I was talking about. Sitting across from me is Dan Sigmond. I'll give you some snippets from his bio. I'll continue to pull from his bio as we go through, and tell you a little bit more about the specialness of this guy and how we're lucky to have him here. It's Dan Sigmond, special agent in the FBI with 19 years of experience, recognized as a subject matter expert in securities fraud, all types of complex financial crimes, forfeiture and seizure, asset seizure, money laundering, and internet fraud schemes. You may like to know Dan served in the Air Force for nearly 10 years after graduating in 1995 with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. There's a lot more to come on Dan. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thank you, Cam.
I'd so much rather have an FBI guy come invited through the door of this office than uninvited through the door of the office. So I'm trying to make some friends here as we get you on the show. I heard your presentation to a local bank about some of the hazards in the world that you deal with, and I thought this is something that my listeners need to know about. Prior to turning on the mics, I introduced Dan to you. You are a business influencer, usually about 45 years old and older. You have an interest in supporting the business in which you work or in which you own, and we're going to try to focus the questions to Dan based with that in mind. Dan, let's start with a very broad question. You wake up in the morning as an FBI agent. What do you do? What does the day of an FBI agent look like?
Well, the first thing I do is I grab a cup of coffee.
So relatable. So relatable.
But
yeah.
By the time I make it into the office, I'm basically looking at, just like everyone else in the world, right? We're looking at a barrage of emails, whereas most of the emails that I'm dealing with at the beginning of the day are from financial institutions, government agencies, other types of local and state law enforcement, even federal law enforcement organizations, as follow-ups to ongoing matters that we're investigating. The majority of stuff that we do here, especially in the Mobile division, as opposed to the larger FBI headquarters or other places that I've been, here locally in Mobile, Alabama, we're looking at financial institutional fraud. So majority of the work that I do, as you asked, the first thing in the morning is going to be responding to requests, follow-up requests, questions regarding certain court service that we've provided to banks.
So you start the day in the weeds. You start the day quickly into the weeds of all this communication with different people about the ongoing investigations you're involved with.
I think that's part of being an FBI agent. I think every FBI agent would agree that they start in the weeds. It never slows down. It's 10 hours a day, if not more, of nonstop activity. It's never boring.
Financial crimes. It's a very broad term. Give me an example of what we're talking about here.
So one example that we typically deal with is like a bank fraud scheme. And that could be something as simple as someone counterfeiting checks to someone developing some type of elaborate wire fraud scheme where they've convinced an entity, a business, to wire money to an account that wasn't necessarily the correct account, whether or not they gain access to that account through some type of email compromise or social engineering technique. But that's the majority of crimes that we focus on, at least in the financial crimes area.
Is it safe to say that that each one of these financial crimes, there is an unwillful participant in this? Like, for example, me. I mistakenly did something and I didn't know it, but I'm now a tool in a financial crime. Or most of the financial crimes you deal with all orchestrated by people who are willfully involved in this. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think it's a combination of both. When I talk about the money mules, because that's what you're referring to, is someone who is involved in transitioning the money from either the victim to the bad subject or ultimately to its final destination, whether that be a complex criminal organization or just another person in the line of the ultimate scheme. And so like a cog in a wheel, for example. But when the FBI does a really good job, and I know that every agent that works financial crimes does an excellent job in the FBI, because that's what we do when we focus on financial institutional fraud and other types of complex financial crimes, is we do a really good job of determining the level of, complicity of that particular person. So you just mentioned yourself, like if you're completely innocent, you did something innocently, and now you're involved in some major crime, the FBI is going to want to interview, is going to talk to you, and is going to learn, what your involvement is, and hopefully elicit your assistance in bringing those who need to be brought to justice. And so we always talk about, like, in the realm of money mules, we break them into 3 different categories: unwitting, witting, and complicit. And witting is that like middle area, the kind of the gray area.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas complicit is obviously like black and white,
Complicit is he or she knew exactly what they were doing, chose to do it anyway, and is guilty of whatever is going on here.
Yeah, typically a complicit person that's involved in a money laundering network is a criminal in himself, and they know exactly what they're doing.
Give me a sense of the sophistication of these. You use the term money mule. These money mule arrangements, are they... in my mind's eye, I see a bank of computers all flashing with different color lights as these people are, getting their money mules lined up or something like that? Or is it just somebody walking up to me as I'm jogging around the park going, "Hey, buddy, I need some help"?
Yeah. Typically, it is somewhat of a complex organization because ultimately when they victimize someone that is the kind of, person that you mentioned, the innocent babe in the woods, right?
Yeah.
Or someone that just completely is oblivious to what's going on. That person is typically a victim of some type of other scheme, like a romance scam or like kind of a online job scam.
Go back to romance scam. This is curious to me. This is obviously a genre of scams, or you wouldn't have a term for it. What exactly is that?
So a romance scam is someone that's convinced, like either through a dating website or it could even be through some other type of social media, that they've met the love of their life and that they never have met them in person, but they're convinced that they are, someone that is either meets their criteria for a dating application, or in some situations, I've even investigated crimes where someone impersonated someone that they knew and did it in such sophistication that it convinced the other person that they were indeed, their lover, and in fact they weren't. And so they gain their trust, and they build that up over time. It takes a little bit of time to develop a complex romance scam. And then once they do that, they say, especially if it's like an overseas relationship, they're like, "Hey, it'll be something as simple as, I'm having trouble getting my visa. I need some money in order to do that. Could you send it to this person?" Or they say something develop. I've seen some situations where they're like, "And my uncle is having trouble. He's in the hospital," or "I'm in the hospital. I need money." Or it's always eventually money is the key thing, right? Mm-hmm. Or some type of, return on investment for the scam artist. And what we see is how that's built into the money mule network is a lot of times the romance scam victim thinks that that's why they're giving the money, or that's why they're taking the money, or, like let's say part of the romance game is like, hey, I have this money, I need to convert it into another type of currency. Could you do it for me because I'm currently unable to do so and I love you? And so out of love and trust, they do it.
And ultimately, you have to look at this person and say, I don't really think they liked you. You are the other side of the scam. There's nothing here, pal. It seems like this is much more vulnerable to men than women. There's nothing here, pal. They're using you in a crime, and you have to break the news to them. Or at some point, they say, you know what? That money never came back the way they told me it would. Is that it?
Yeah, it's a little more complex than that, but it is kind of hard to break the news to that person.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. We'll come back after this break. I want to hear more about the sophistication of some of these scams, whether it's with just somebody walking down the street with an idea or it's really thought out and complex. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be right back.
This is Bill Eastet. I perfected my baking recipe behind my live music stage at my little restaurant in Fairhope, Alabama. We have custom-made smokers and small batch bacon made just for you. So if you're looking for the best bacon in America that has been cured, smoked, and even serenaded by songwriters, you definitely need to try Billy's Small Batch Bacon. www.billysbacon.com.
Listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Dan Sigmond is sitting across from me in the studio. I told you I'd give you a little bit more about his background. We'll pick it up here. Dan served as a supervisor in the cyber division and subsequently the director's office, leading the FBI's InfraGuard program, one of the nation's largest public and private partnerships that connects the Bureau with critical infrastructure owners. He's also a combat decorated veteran, ending his career at the Air Force Information Warfare Center in San Antonio, Texas. You know, you military guys really, you abbreviate everything because the words that it takes are huge. Air Force Information Warfare Center in San Antonio, Texas. After serving in Panama and both Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. He has a Master's of Science in Management and Technology from the University of Texas, San Antonio, and his thesis, Retaining Scientists and Engineers in the Air Force, was published in The Military Engineer. Dan, prior to the break, we were getting in a little bit into sophistication. Are these financial crimes committed by some dude that's walking down the road and sees a checkbook and says, hey, this is an opportunity? Or is it committed by somebody who's got a spreadsheet and a flow chart and yarn connecting, those little pins that you see on TV where the thumbtack is in the wall and he's got all these things tied together in the wall? What is the sophistication level of most of the things you're dealing with?
So most of the things that we deal with in the FBI are going to be extremely sophisticated. The guy that happens to cross a checkbook and the criminal that decides to use that as opposed to the Good Samaritan that would turn in that checkbook, that's something that typically the local and state law enforcement will investigate. But you mentioned the level of sophistication. And what we see is when our victims are interviewed, the 9 times out of 10, they mention that they've been somewhat targeted by some type of what we call social engineering technique. Mm-hmm. And whether that's someone impersonating employees or, some type of call forwarding or manipulation with the telephone system or even manipulation with the email system, like an email phishing technique. All these methods are ways that criminals obtain personal information, and then they use those through a variety of techniques, in particular cyber criminals and other complex financial crime criminals, that work together. And that basically, allows them to steal the victim's data, whether the victim be an individual or a business entity, and then sometimes even extort them for money. This is something that we see a lot of here, not only in the FBI nationwide, but even here locally in Mobile, Alabama.
So what are the two questions come to mind. Number one, you told a story when I saw your presentation about the ability of some of these people to monitor emails and then send an email when they know the person is away and say, hey, I'm vacationing, as you know, in the Bahamas. I need you to quickly transfer blank to blank. And the email that they send is a perfect mirror of who would typically send this, but it's been hijacked. Is that correct?
Correct. It's what we call business email compromise.
Which means that someone has been monitoring the email system waiting for this opening. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
How do I know if someone's monitoring my email? I mean, I think of the McAfee virus scan. That's got to be much more sophisticated. What we're talking about here has got to be much more sophisticated than some sort of virus scan can pick up.
Yeah, and in the majority of the investigation that's taken place after the fact, after we start looking into how this happened, 9 out of 10 times we determine that someone within the business clicked on a link they weren't supposed to, compromised the network.
It comes from inside, yeah.
Because by us doing more and more outreach like this, by not only websites like ic3.gov and other FBI outreach programs and other local and state law enforcement and other federal agency law outreach programs, by educating the public more and more on kind of how to maintain vigilancy, right? How to kind of question things that don't seem right. That's really ultimately the best way, because when it all comes down to it, it is some type of social engineering technique that seems, the majority of times that seems to compromise these, whether it be, the network or whether it be just the individual business, whether it be as simple as something over the phone and convincing, someone's secretary to, reroute money to, a different account, or whether it be as sophisticated to intercept an email of an invoice, for example, modify that invoice, change the routing number, change the account number, change the email somewhat slightly so that it's a different email, but it looks the same.
I've seen samples of this. Yeah.
You have to pay attention.
Yeah.
You have to question everything. And if you have an ongoing relationship, especially if you're running a business, and you deal with a lot of payments received and payments, sent. If you're sending payments, if you're receiving payments, if you're basically managing your business, you have to pay attention to how that business is being operated. And if there's a minor change in routing or account payments or whatever, then you need to stay on top of it.
Tell me this. You talk about the sophistication and these bad guys, these criminals working together. Where do they meet one another? They don't obviously hold conventions at the Marriott downtown and say, hey, we're bad guys and we're looking for other people to get complicit in our check forging scheme or something like that. But they've got I assume the same business tools that I use to network and meet clients, they're likely using to meet one another. Am I crazy to think that?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I think that when we talk about overseas actors, I think that's precisely what they're doing. They're working together. They're kind of orchestrating schemes and techniques in order to solicit, assistance in order to further their crimes, whether that be, like, as I mentioned before, the romance scam victim, or whether it be something like a lottery scheme victim or a job.
Are they training each other?
We have research to suggest that overseas actors do train, whether they be state sponsored or other types of criminal organizations, that there is some level of training. I know that when I was in the Air Force working intelligence with the AFWIC, you talked about that long name. We abbreviate it to the AFWIC, the Air Force Information Warfare Center. We used to go to these conventions in Las Vegas called Black Hat and DEF CON. And that was particularly for cyber incidents and cyber crimes, and they would talk about like trends and exploits and things that they were seeing. It was an educational conference for law enforcement and the military, but it was also a gathering of people that were up to no good. That's for sure.
So let me ask you. Let's assume that my father, who's 87 years old, he was saying some things to me that was raising an alarm, or his employees, or I had employees that were saying some things that were raising alarms. How do I deal with my hypothetically my father, who's single and 87 years old, who says, I've met someone online and she needed, I don't know, you can make it up.
Sure.
But she's genuine and I'm not getting scammed. And I think, Dad, maybe we should get a second opinion here. What is my reaction to that? What do I do? Or an employee who could say something similar.
Well, I think, one of the things that if you or if anyone you know or a loved one is solicited through any type of computer pop-up, social media, dating sites, text, email, phone call, especially if it's someone who either you or the guardian or even the victim themselves, have never met, then you have to consider that it may be a scam. And there are certain things that kind of as a follow-up to that, right? And that would be like, have you been asked to invest in cryptocurrency or gold futures? Or has someone claimed to be a bank or a government agency or requested money to liquidate accounts in order to clear you of a crime? Like you hear about these scams targeting the elderly in particular. Like the IRS called me and they told me I owe money, and if I don't pay them,
I've heard
they
those
need
stories.
to get gift cards. And I mean, but when I give these presentations, I tell people like the IRS would never call you. If anything, they're going to send you something in the mail.
Yeah.
And then, of course, family members and other people that you're romantically interested in.
Let's pick this up after the break. I want to hear, so you've told me the questions to ask my family member. What do I do? And we'll pick that up after the break. Do I call you, or do I go slap their hand and unplug their computer? You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. In the studio, Dan Sigmond with the FBI. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. Sitting across from me is Dan Sigmond, Acting Supervisory Special Agent for White Collar Crimes. His expertise is financial crimes. I told you I'd pick up from his bio. Dan is a certified defense tactics instructor and has been the recipient of several awards, including the FBI's Medal of Excellence. His hobbies are fitness, yoga, playing piano. I didn't see that the first time through, playing piano. Your wife, a former FBI agent and assistant district attorney, is now a federal attorney with the U.S. Small Business Administration. You guys are all in, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
You're all in. That's good. So let's pick this up again. My father, hypothetically, folks, those of you that may know my father, hypothetically, has said some things to me that make me concerned that he may be slowly being groomed, if that's the right term, for a scam. Do I call you, Dan? Do I tell Dad, stop doing this, I'm unplugging your phone? Is there another step I take? I've got an employee who says, hey, I've met somebody online, and this one's for real this time, or something like that. What do I do?
So one of the things that you do is you go to www.ic3.gov.
The letter I, the letter C, the number 3.gov.
And there's an enormous amount of resources there. And you can also file a complaint. It's very easy to use, very user-friendly. And then, of course, there's a phone number if you have, normally reserved for people that are 60 or older, but that number is 833-372-8311. And that's for assistance in filing your IC3 report.
Mm-hmm.
But the wonderful thing about IC3 is not only is it have a lot of resources for the things that you're mentioning, but there's also, public service announcements. There's resources for people that really want to get into the weeds and have curiosity involving, hey, what the FBI is doing and investigate these types of crimes. There's trends. They've broken it down by the state. And it even talks about every year they come out with an annual report. and it summarizes, of course, based on what's reported to IC3, but it summarizes the crimes and categorizes them and what we see across the nation.
You talk about summarizing the crimes. How do you stay sharp? These criminals are crafty. They got tools that you and I don't think about. How do you stay sharp to make sure the newest crime trends are in front of you and you're not taken aback by anything or caught off guard by anything?
Well, the FBI, like every other government organization, loves its training, and so we're constantly training. We're constantly educating not only ourselves, but our local, state, and other federal law enforcement partners. We work hand in hand with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we're kept apprised of not only ongoing trends in crimes that we're seeing, but also ongoing trends in criminal cases and prosecutions and of the like.
Are you ever surprised by what you learn anymore? By somebody comes to you with a story, or you learn one of these trends in one of your training sessions? Do you ever just figuratively smack yourself in the forehead with your palm and go, "Oh, wow"?
Well, I think everyone has a certain humility, especially as an FBI agent. And the answer to that question would be, of course, yes. But I would say that ever since my time working violent crimes in Texas, nothing shocks me. I used to say that all the time. Nothing really does shock me anymore. So I think what I mean by that is I'm not shocked to be shocked.
That's a good way to put it. Being shocked is no longer an unfamiliar feeling.
Correct.
When you're talking to somebody who, let's say, I'm interested in your radar, meaning you're talking to somebody and you can hear through their words, "Oh yeah, man, you're being duped. I can hear this." How accurate is your radar, your sense of these things? Did I see? You've got 19 years. After 19 years, your radar's got to be kind of acute to things like this. Is that the case?
I'd say when it comes to assessing over the phone a victim's, in a culpability, whether or not they're involved in the scam or whether they're unwittingly or wittingly participating in the scam, I think I'm batting 1,000.
Really? You've got a sense of these things now?
I think that especially, what we do before we do any interview or before I contact anyone, I'm going to basically run a background check on them. I'm going to, determine their age, their demographic. And if they fit within a certain, like, for example, I'll give you an example. If I determine that I've got a 75-year-old, individual that is sending cash in the mail to another individual that we know is an overseas, either someone here on a legal or a non-legal status, right there. That right away just tells me that more than likely this is some type of lottery scheme or something similar to that, because why would this 75-year-old person be sending money to cash, in particular mailing cash, to another individual that they don't even know halfway across the United States? And so when we call the shipper, the victim, and we start talking to them and they start mentioning, well, it's because Publishers Clearinghouse contacted me or whatever, well, bingo, that we know right away that they're not involved in the crime, that they're a victim of the crime. And especially with their demographic, we see that a lot more with elderly population than we do with people that are under the age of 60, because, our generation and the generation before us knows better, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the older generation has been brought up to believe that someone's going to become knocking on their door and give them a check for the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
Or that the preacher in Jamaica needs the money for his congregation. That's one of a friend of mine's mother, and it took him forever to convince his mother that this is probably not exactly what it seems, Mom. It's not illegal to send that money, is it? It's just a scam. They're being scammed. If I wanted to send money to my friend who is the preacher in Jamaica, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that preacher in Jamaica is not actually a preacher in Jamaica, something's wrong with that.
Something's wrong with it, but again, it's still, especially if it's innocent, it's still not you doing something illegal. It's just unfortunate you're now a victim of a scam.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of things. You're out of the violent crimes unit. Is that what you called it previously in Texas?
Yeah, I was assigned to the Safe Streets Task Force and the Crimes Against Children Task Force.
Oh gosh, and you've seen victims of scams here in the Mobile office where you work. what keeps you going? It's got to be your sales have got to be regularly let down to see people harmed, both literally and physically. After 19 years of this, what keeps you getting up in the morning?
Well, I think I like being an FBI agent. I like working cases with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I like bringing people to justice, and I like doing the victims, right. I love the organization. I like my squad. I like all my teammates, squad mates, and I like almost everyone that I work with. I think that's the canned response that I should be giving when I'm doing this interview.
Let's play it
because I think people listening are really, well, Dan sounds so nice. Like, what happened? But no, in all seriousness, I think it's the same type of work or dedication that drove me to join the military. It's the same thing that's led me to this form of government service. This is just kind of the next step until I retire and then decide what my final career is going to be.
What is a win to you? When you come home from the work at the end of the day and you said, sweetheart, I had a big win today. What is that?
I think most of the time that involves, in my particular arena, it involves getting money back for the victim. I think that is one of the most satisfying parts of my job is when I'm able to return stolen proceeds or, criminal proceeds through, some type of complex scheme to our victims. Because a lot of times, even when we get a prosecution, our victims seem somewhat dissatisfied with, a sentence on a bad guy if they didn't get their money back.
Give us that website that you mentioned again. I want you to say it closely because there's somebody out there that's thinking, I need to learn more.
And that's the Internet Crime and Complaint Center. That's www.ic3.gov.
That will be in the show notes for the podcast version. Folks, go to what'sworkingcam.com if you want to click on it with your finger on your phone right now. Dan, thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your content. And thank you for your willingness to pursue some nasty stuff.
Thank you, Cam.
We'll be back after this break with segment 5. I'll recap what we heard, and I'll tell you what's coming. You're listening to What's Working. Back after this.
I'm Joey Mason. For 4 years, my goal has been to produce the best farm-to-table products I'd ever eaten. I've done just that at our on-site USDA facility in Grand Bay, Alabama, allowing us to ship directly to your door. This is true farm-to-table. Visit us at masonhillsfarm.com to see all that we have to offer.
Listening to What's Working. We're in segment 5, which is the one that wraps up the show, where I usually say, here's what I heard. Here's the lessons that I got from this week's episode. And here's the points that I want to send us along the way with. One of the things that we talked about when the mics were off, and if you're a regular listener to the show, you've heard me say that so many times when the mics were off, but elder abuse and the frequency with which elder abuse happens. And I'm not talking about physical abuse. I'm talking about the elder generations being taken advantage of financially. They shared stories about people being told they'd won awards, and in order to get the award, they had to send a deposit to receive the reward, the lottery or a ticket or something like that. And went on to say they can be in a front of a room and tell these stories, and they can see by the gestures, by the facial expressions, by the body language of the people in the room, that there's always one or two people that have fallen for these things. And they don't report them due to embarrassment. They're ashamed of being told that they've been made a fool of. So if you've got somebody special out there that might be vulnerable to this, send them this show or relay to them the highlights of this What's Working episode, and tell them to be very cautious of anything that seems perhaps, as they always say, a little too good to be true. I certainly am guilty of clicking on things that arrive in my inbox that are flashy and promise quick rewards. I've done it in the past. I haven't done it in a long time. But before I became a little bit more sophisticated with this, I was guilty of it, and I'm sure perhaps we've all been. I said in the opening comments, it takes more than common sense, and it does. It takes a little bit more of an awareness of how the bad guy can get in. Nevertheless, after hearing Dan talk, there is a component of common sense that needs to play in here. And the money can be clawed back, but it's not a process that you want to have to go through if you can prevent it from happening. So caution and prudence being the best form there. Dan had a list of other things that he could have talked about that I feel like would be valuable to listeners. And I said this in the opening comments. I'll say it again. It might be good to have them back. I love to hear business success stories. I love to hear ideas that manifest themselves into a great business plan. I love to hear best practices in business. But it's also prudent of us that we be very cautious of things that can go wrong. And for that reason, we'll work on having Dan and his FBI team or colleagues, if there's others that he feels that would be valuable to add to this, back on the show at some point. It's sad that there's so many bad guys out there that if they could focus their genius, and that's the word for it, their genius at stealing money, on good things, the world would be a much better place. However, I am a Pollyanna. There's always rose-colored glasses over my eyes. I think people should behave the right way for the right reasons. Bad guys exist, folks. We got to be careful of them. Anyway, that'll wrap us up for this week. You can find this show at what'sworkingcam.com. You can find all the previous shows there. I encourage you to check me out on social media where we post updates on the shows and reviews and things like that. Do your best to have a good week, everybody. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes. They're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen to this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.